Hey, welcome back to the wood shop, everybody, and thanks for clicking on the video. I greatly appreciate it. I got a request from the neighbor, or a couple of neighbors, to build some cutting boards. So I got some scrap oak. It's all end grain, and these are from a project years ago where a work associate bought a restaurant and wanted some. He also bought a bunch of square tables, and he wanted me to make them round. They were huge, and this is all scraps left over from that. And I made a coffee table out of a bunch of the scraps, which I'll show right here. Turned out really nice, and I've had these scraps in a box quite a few years now, and I figured instead of toting them to the Homestead for another few years, I'll go ahead and make up these cutting boards, and make sure the right people get them. First thing you gotta do on a big glue up is make sure there's no little pieces of sawdust, in my case spider webs, mouse droppings, whatever, to screw up your joints. And I have a couple where the glue joint failed on the end grain. I have to sand these two ends to make them fit together nice. Actually, these ones fit real nice, so I'll leave those. I recommend you have your clamps ready to go. Alright, we're ready to dump our glue on. You don't have to double glue the end piece, and I'm being pretty liberal with my glue, so just make sure all sides are covered. Glue's not squishing out the joints and you don't have enough glue on it. That's my mantra. This little trowel works good. I think it's a cheap tile trowel. It has the grooves in it. That way you don't end up with too much glue. But it seems to work pretty well. All the way to the edges, all corners covered. Don't be lazy. Once I get these glued up, and then I gotta trim them, and I'll have to be doing that with a skill saw probably, because of course I packed my table saw this weekend up to the Homestead. Go figure. Alright, everything's covered. I got that one little end grain, and with this tight bond you got about, oh, it's the first one, you big dummy. You got about 45 or about 30 minutes before it starts to set up, but even after it gets tacky you can still clamp it and be just fine. These are going to be trimmed all the way around, so I don't have to be exact on my lineup, but I'll be as close as I can. get a simple straight edge. Pick one good side and go with it. The other side let run wild. Double check, make sure I have no big gaps. This one does. I'll see if I can flip it. Yep. And this one has a little gap. Good to go. Now on that one piece I'll have to clamp it both ways, so I want to keep these clamps down out of the way. Snug this one. Look, I'm wrong clamp. There they are. Just snug them at first or your pieces are going to start taking off on you. Snug both ends. Make sure they're as flush as possible. That's going to be, I don't have a planer, so I'll be hand sanding these. They've been pre-cut on the table saw, so they're pretty much the same height. Now let me get this one end to end. To make sure that joint doesn't open up. There it goes, nice and tight. This is short enough where I don't think I'll need a clamp in the center. So we are good to go on this one. I'll set it off to the side, and if I got enough clamps, I have 3 of these. I already have one done. So if I have enough clamps, I'll do number 3. Alright, let me wipe this down. Before it dries. And you also want to make sure that you don't over clamp your glue ups, because if you squish all the glue out, it will actually weaken the joint a little bit, unless your wood is real rough cut, and then it will get into the pores of the wood and what have you. But if it's real smooth, just use a medium to mild to medium clamping pressure to allow a teeny little bit of glue to stay in those joints. Now we have block number 3 ready to go. Let me find some clamps. Now you may have noticed that I left the excess glue on there. I didn't scrape it or wash it. My philosophy on that, after 30-40 years of experience, is if you plan on staining the piece, especially if there's end grain, I don't recommend washing off the glue, because it actually washes it into the pores of the wood and you'll get a real blotchy stain job. Even if you scrape that, no matter how careful you are, you'll push that glue into the grain of the wood. As it's dripping like that, the glue is thick enough, and if you don't push it into the grain, chances are it's just going to stay on the surface, and that's not a hard scrape to get it off after it's dry, and you'll get a lot better results with your stain get these things popped out of the clamps. A shop can never have too many clamps. Whenever you think you got enough, you need about twice as much. Word to the wise, pick up every clamp you can find at every garage sale. Because you will use them. And take care of your clamps. You don't want to over clamp, especially with these little guys like this, because you'll end up bending the rod. They still work, they just don't look as pretty. See how that glue is just sitting on the surface? Should be pretty easy to scrape off. If it's hard to scrape off, I won't show you because that'll make me a liar. Just saying. Oh, here's another good reason, with oak at least. See that dark stain? That comes from moisture, oak, and metal. So it actually, when you get them wet, that dark stain will be all over the place. Alright, let me get these clamps put away and I'll flip you back on. Alright, around this place somewhere I have some scrapers and what have you, but I totally can't find them because my shop is chaos right now. So I'm going to hit it with the good old Makita side grinder. I have an adapter on there and I have a coarse sandpaper. Very gently so I don't end up with a bunch of divots. Always check your headphones for spiders and earwigs. Ask me how I know. Try to keep bouncing around and let your disc, to keep your disc cool, let it spin without grinding, because if this gets hot, instead of cutting off the glue, it will start melting it. Then you end up with a big mess and clogged up paper. Alright, let's square this thing up. Don't worry, if you don't have a sliding miter saw, you can use a table saw with your miter gauge, or you could use a skill saw with a straight edge. I'm just using this because I'm lucky enough to own it. Although this blade is dull, so I'm going to have to fight it. Yeah, just wow. But the edges are getting covered, so I'm not worried about a little burn. Whew, that made some smoke. All squared up though. Looks kind of cool. I like the pattern. Alright, let's find some material to get an edge on it. Holy crap, she's a flooding. Got the Swanee River coming down. Well, no table saw. And all I have for trim around the cutting board is some nice old school poplar. So, back to the skill saw. I left a little bit proud on there so I can either sand it back or use a router to smooth out my cut, or a block plane. That'll work. I like the grain of this old school poplar. And this other piece is almost as dark as walnut. Believe it or not, that's poplar. Yep. Oh, come on. I don't trust these clamps that much. That's pretty sturdy. I started this cut with the chop saw. Not for the faint of heart. You can do it, minimal tools. Alright. Let me get these cut. Get ready to apply, and then I'll turn you back on. Now here's a perfect example of following the grain. I want to block plane this edge to smooth it out a little. And you see the way the grain goes this way? If I were to come in there with my block plane this way, it would rip and tear and catch all this edge grain. So what you want to do is go with the flow and follow the grain so you're going with it instead of against it. Now, do you see I went with the grain? Do you see how nice and smooth that come out? No tearing. Now the same thing applies on like a joiner where the blade is spinning this way. If you ran the board that way, it would rip out that grain. So what you want to, and nobody hardly ever talks about this with planers and joiners, you watch the grain and you get the blade going downhill with the grain, and that will make a nice smooth edge. Now believe it or not, oh, perfect example. See how the grain on the side? If you're running this through a planer, the blade's going this way, you're going with the grain, actually uphill, and it will come out smooth. If you ran it this way, it would be going against that grain and keep chipping out, and you'll end up with a real rough surface. Now on the miter saw, when you're cutting your 45s at the corner, it's better to put it on an accurate 45, check it with your square, the 45 angle side. When you have a good accurate, it's better to leave your chop saw or your sliding miter saw locked down on that one angle. Cut your first angle, make your mark to the length, and instead of changing the angle on your saw, just flip the board and then you can cut your mark. That way you know this angle is still good. It's a lot more accurate. Accurate? Accurate. Now to keep everything in order and make sure everything is the most accurate, because technically this edge and this edge could be slightly off. So I mark this one number 1. Second cut will be number 2, number 3, and number 4. And I will mark the pieces that I cut for each side that I marked. Did you ever wonder how those fancy woodworking channels, you know, they just grab their pieces and they got them all numbered and they just slap them together and everything fits great and throw the glue and the clamps on? Well, this is how they do it. Each one of these pieces I have shaved with the miter saw like 4 or 5 times, some less, some more. to dry fit this. I got these two pieces clamped, which I got them the correct size, and just kept shaving and shaving until I got them fitting just about perfect as you can get while woodworking. What I'm going to do is leave these two long ones clamped with no glue, and then I'll put these two end ones on with glue. Clamp those first so I have a guide to hold me where I'm supposed to be and nothing will, shift, and you're not fighting yourself chasing 4 clamping surfaces at the same time full of nice slippery glue. Once I get these clamped and stable, then I can release these ones and glue these ones on and not have stuff all shifty-ifty. So let me get some glue on this and we'll carry on. This is my clamp, my new one. My girl Susie got this out of a pile that she was helping move a lady, and the lady didn't want all these tools, so score! Susie snagged it for me. What an awesome girl. Alright, let me get this glued up. Oh crap, I don't have no glue. Be right back. Alright, how unprofessional is that? Now I got glue. Again, I'm being generous with the glue because not so much this poplar, but the oak is pretty porous. Although the side grain isn't that porous, I guess. But you can always wipe off the glue. You can add more. Geez, what a philosopher I am. But I hope I gave you some hints to save some frustration, because it bothers me when I see people frustrating at what could be cool little simple projects. That's another thing about numbering these. I put the number on the glue side, so it also helps me when I take them off, put them on, take them off, to get them all, get them on there the same way every time. Because I don't know about you, but once I start spreading glue, I get panicky. It's weird. It's like, uh-oh, it's forever now. Better be right. Dark side up. I'm going to just squeeze it a little bit thinner. That way it will help line everything up. So I can see I'm off a hair. There we go. Corners feel good, sandable. Not perfect, but sandable. I'm putting the clamps toward the top to put the squeezing emphasis towards the top, because technically who cares about the bottom? I mean, I do, but if there's any flaws, you want them on the bottom, not on the top. Everything's flat on the table. Now we can do the other two ends. Lots of glue on your ends, because the end grain will suck up a lot of that glue. There's actually a technique where you can pre-coat your end grain and let the glue soak in and dry, but which works really well. I've tried it, but who's got time for that? Nothing. The only thing worse than sitting around watching glue dry is watching paint dry. But it does do a better job. You can even use water down your glue slightly so it penetrates better. And it will actually seal that grain and help the new coat of glue hold better. and it's not critical, but if you keep your clamps parallel with what you're gluing, or actually perpendicular, it helps to stop the sliding around. Cover your ears. All the corners look pretty decent. Alright, I'm going to let this set for a couple hours and then I'll turn you back on. Hang tight. Happy rainy next day. It's been raining steady now for like 3 days. We are saturated. Hopefully you're not flooding. Looks like everything glued up nicely. Now it's sanding time. This edge, the top edge, is a little proud. I think I'm going to leave it that way and actually sand it slightly so it has a slight uphill on the edges. That way your chicken breast, if you lose control of it, doesn't go flinging off across your cupboard. I'm going to finish off with the high-speed sander with coarse grit. This is the bottom, just to get it leveled off. Then I'll finish up with the orbital sander. So now I'm just going to mark out for my feet. I want them to the furthest outside corners that I can, so it won't rock when you press on the edge. Now I was thinking about making some little square feet out of a block and turn it on the lathe and make a dowel end on it so they'll sit into a hole. But I may have some rubber feet around here. I'm going to check for that first. So I'll see you back in about 4 hours when I get done digging through my crap. Okay, I looked all over. I could not find any little rubber feet nowhere. So what I did was I found these wooden wheels made out of hardwood or maple, and then they had a little hub in the center, so real carefully with my Forstner bit I drilled it out so these nice little painted screws fit in there below the surface. These are left over from my father's stuff. He used to make toy cars and stuff for kids. So now every time I use the cutting board I can think of my dad, which is kind of cool. I might have to get a bigger drill bit. We'll see. That's a little tight. That's better. Put a little dot of glue on the bottom. I don't want it squishing out all over because it's going to be hard to clean up. Well, that's a cute little foot, I think. If these prove to be too slippery on the countertop, Then I'll find, they make stick-on felt and stick-on rubber. I'll add that to it. But I kind of like them. I think these screws are also stainless steel. I got them for putting a plywood deck in a lawnmower trailer. Oop, forgot the glue. So I think they'll hold up just fine. There, that'll work. That looks pretty cute. Now it's up off the surface just enough where you can get your fingers under it to lift it. Because this is going to be pretty heavy for a cutting board. Sits pretty flat. Now I just need to sand the top. Putting a little chamfer on the edges. Alright, let's get a coat of oil on here. Not sponsored, just something I grabbed off the shelf at the depot. And don't worry, if this coat of oil, cutting board oil, shows up any scratches and stuff, I can still sand it back. And I am going to put a ton on there because this wood's been dry for a long time. And we'll just let it soak. Then I'll wipe it back, soak it again, and wipe it back. This poplar actually looks pretty gorgeous. I mean, you wouldn't think just poplar, you know. But I just wanted to show that you don't need a $5,000 drum sander and a $8,000 planer. You can do most of this stuff by hand. It just takes a little longer. I don't have that many hours other than glue drying. I got less than a day into this. Looks pretty snazzy, I think. Let me back out just a hair. Wrong way. There we go. I think it looks pretty awesome. The poplar is a dark green, and then the lighter stuff on the ends, but it's still the poplar. I think she looks pretty snazzy. And I got two more to do. Wow, this oil's everywhere. Condition my hands as well, I guess. I'll just let this soak for an hour or two, and then I'll come back and wipe it off. And then I'll put another coat. Might even read the directions. It's crazy. Just crazy talk. Don't forget to do the bottom. And the little, what do you think of my little wheel feet? I think they look kind of cool. So far it doesn't seem to be, I mean, this is coated with Formica and it doesn't seem to be sliding around that much. Like I say, if it does, I'll find some stick-on rubber pads or felt that I'll put right on those little wheels, and that'll stop it from sliding around. I would greatly appreciate a thumbs up or subscribe if you're not. I'll put some links to some pretty cool channels down in the description. Go check them out. Tell them I sent you. There's some really cool channels on YouTube. You just got to go exploring. I put a little chamfer in all the edges. Usually I prefer like an 1/8 inch roundover or an 1/8 inch bead. But guess what? I didn't have one, so I went with a very small chamfer. I think it was like a 3/4 or 1 inch, but I set it where it wasn't cutting very deep, and it turned out lovely. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Play nice.